the skull that shouldn't exist. Imagine this. You are kneeling in the middle of a vast desert in southern Peru. The setting sun has painted the entire sky in brilliant shades of gold and amber. The wind carries tiny grains of sand as they drift silently across ancient tombs that have rested undisturbed for thousands of years. Around you, archaeologists carefully brush away the final layers of earth with soft brushes, revealing fragments of finely woven textiles and ceramic vessels buried alongside the dead. Then, suddenly, a skull emerges. But the instant you catch sight of it, you know something isn't right. Its forehead is astonishingly tall. The back of the skull stretches unnaturally far behind the head. Its entire shape appears almost no longer quite human. For more than a century, skulls like this have fueled countless debates, inspired bold theories, and given rise to some of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Were these simply ordinary people whose skulls had been intentionally reshaped from infancy? Or did they belong to an extraordinary elite, a class of individuals so revered that later generations remembered them as descendants of the gods themselves? And why do these elongated heads appear not only in Peru, they also emerge in the ancient art of Bolivia, throughout numerous cultures of Central America, and even in regions separated by thousands of kilometers? Is it merely a coincidence, or are they all reflecting the memory of something history has long since forgotten? For decades, many people believed these skulls were evidence of a lost civilization. Others went even further, claiming they were the unmistakable traces of extraterrestrial visitors who had walked the earth in prehistoric times. But science tells a very different story. Archaeological evidence shows that the vast majority of Peru's elongated skulls were the result of a cultural practice known as intentional cranial modification, a tradition that once existed in many ancient civilizations across the world. Yet, that answer opens the door to an even more fascinating question. Why would an entire society deliberately reshape the heads of its own newborn children? What could possibly matter so deeply that parents would willingly alter their children's bodies throughout the earliest years of life? Anthropologists believe this was never simply about appearance. It was about status, about power, about identity, and about the desire to become part of something greater than oneself. Because throughout human history, we have never survived on food, water, and shelter alone. We have also lived by symbols, by belief, by the stories an entire society chooses to accept as truth. Perhaps that is why the greatest mystery of the long-headed people does not lie in the shape of their skulls. It lies within the minds of the people who created them. What convinced an entire civilization that the natural human form was somehow not enough? And if the answer does not lie with extraterrestrials, then it may reveal something even more astonishing, a profound truth about human nature itself. Today, we will journey back through time into the ancient deserts of Peru, not only to discover who the long-headed people truly were, but also to uncover why, throughout hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution, our species has always sought to transform itself, to become a little closer to the divine, a little closer to power, or perhaps simply a little closer to the dreams we choose to believe. Why did ancient Peruvians intentionally change the shape of their children's skulls? If you had lived in the Andes some 2,000 years ago, you probably would never have believed that a naturally round head was the most beautiful shape a child could have. To us today, wrapping an infant's head in cloth or securing wooden boards around it sounds almost unbelievable, perhaps even cruel. But to many ancient communities, it was an act of profound love, a gift that parents offered their children from the very first days of life. It sounds contradictory, yet human history has always been filled with contradictions like this. Archaeological evidence shows that when a baby is born, the bones of the skull have not yet completely fused together. This remarkable flexibility allows the brain to continue growing throughout the early years of life. Ancient Peruvians took advantage of this biological characteristic by wrapping long bands of cloth around an infant's head, or fastening 2 wooden boards on either side for months at a time, sometimes even for several years. As time passed, the skull continued to grow, but it grew into the shape that people desired. What is truly remarkable is that, despite the dramatic change in outward appearance, modern research suggests that this practice generally did not reduce brain volume or interfere with normal brain development when carried out properly. The brain simply adapted to the new space created by the reshaped skull. In other words, these elongated heads were never evidence of another human species. They were evidence of humanity's extraordinary ability to deliberately reshape the body in pursuit of cultural values. But that leads us to an even more important question. Why would they want to do it? If beauty alone were the goal, was it really worth asking a child to endure years of tightly bound bands wrapped around its head? Anthropologists believe the answer does not lie in aesthetics. It lies in identity. Human beings are the only animals willing to transform their own bodies in order to tell the world who they are. Today, we tattoo our skin. We wear braces. We undergo cosmetic surgery. We adorn ourselves with jewelry. We wear uniforms. Some of us even willingly endure pain in pursuit of society's standards of beauty. Thousands of years ago, the people of ancient Peru were doing exactly the same thing. The only difference was, their symbol was not worn on their clothing. It was carried on their skulls. An elongated head could communicate countless things without a single word being spoken. It revealed which family you belonged to, where you had grown up, what status you held within society, and sometimes, it even proclaimed that you had been born to rule. What makes this even more fascinating is that this custom was far from unique to Peru. Archaeological evidence has uncovered intentionally modified skulls throughout Central Asia, Eastern Europe, Africa, and many regions of the Americas. Each culture produced its own distinctive shape, yet all of them shared the same fundamental idea. The human body is more than biology. It is also a language that speaks without words. A child raised with an elongated skull would grow up beneath the gaze of the entire community, and from the very first moment others saw that child, they immediately knew where he or she belonged. That reveals something profoundly important about human psychology. We rarely see a body as merely a body. We see status, power, belief, and the stories that society chooses to project onto that body. Perhaps that is why the real mystery has never been how the ancient Peruvians managed to create elongated skulls. The true mystery is why an entire society came to believe that a different physical form could make someone more extraordinary. But if elongated heads were simply symbols of status, why, over the centuries, did they gradually become associated with the gods? How did flesh and blood human beings become figures, suspended somewhere between history and myth in the memories of future generations? That is precisely where this story begins to step beyond archaeology and enters the world of mythology. Why did ordinary people become descendants of the gods? History follows a curious pattern. As time passes, people often forget the facts, but they remember the stories. A brilliant king may become the son of the sun. A fearless warrior may grow into a giant. A wise ruler may one day be remembered as a god who descended from the heavens. This did not happen only in Peru. It happened in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, in China, in Greece, and in nearly every civilization we have ever known. So what happened to the long-headed people? Anthropologists suggest that the answer may lie in the way human beings remember power. Within Inca society, and throughout many cultures across the Andes, the ruling class possessed far more than wealth or military strength. They also had to appear fundamentally different from everyone else. That difference could be seen everywhere. In their clothing, their jewelry, their hairstyles, their elaborate rituals, and even in the shape of their bodies. This was never merely fashion. It was a political language. If you could recognize who held authority from a great distance, then power existed long before a single word was spoken. Archaeological evidence shows that Inca nobles often wore enormous earrings made of gold, silver, or precious stones. Their weight gradually stretched the earlobes over many years. When the Spanish first arrived in the Andes during the 16th century, they were deeply struck by this remarkable sight. They called these nobles orejones, meaning the big-eared ones. But to the Inca themselves, long ears were not a deformity. They were a sign of noble blood. A symbol of authority, proof that you belong to a world entirely different from the farmers laboring in the valleys below. Now imagine what happens. 100 years pass, then 200, then 500. Kings die. Dynasties collapse. Wars erase the memories of generations. Magnificent palaces crumble into ruins. All that remains are stone statues with unusually elongated heads. ancient tombs filled with long skulls, and stories passed down from grandparents to grandchildren. Human beings rarely accept that their ancestors were simply ordinary people. Instead, we transform them into extraordinary figures. Cognitive psychologists suggest that the human brain naturally searches for explanations that carry deeper meaning, rather than those that are merely simple. If a people once built magnificent cities, if they commanded almost absolute power, if they organized vast empires, then, in the memories of those who came after them, they could easily become the chosen ones of the gods, or perhaps even gods themselves. That is why many legends throughout the Andes tell us that the Inca rulers were descendants of Inti, the sun god. Not because the Inca literally believed that the sun physically gave birth to human beings, but because that belief made political authority sacred. If the king was the son of a god, then opposing the king meant opposing the very order of the universe. It was an extraordinarily powerful idea. But the story becomes even more fascinating when another figure appears within Andean mythology. A god who did more than create humanity. He was also believed to have brought knowledge to civilization itself. His name was Viracocha. According to many legends, Viracocha appeared after an age of chaos had consumed the world. He taught humanity how to build, how to organize society, how to live together. Then, he walked toward the ocean and disappeared beyond the horizon. It sounds strangely familiar, doesn't it? A mysterious figure arrives carrying knowledge, transforms an entire civilization, then vanishes, leaving no one certain where he came from. The same pattern appears in countless cultures across the world. In Mesoamerica, there is Quetzalcoatl. In Egypt, Thoth. In Mesopotamia, Oannes. Nearly every civilization tells the story of a first teacher who brought wisdom to humankind. The most reasonable explanation is that these stories are not memories of extraterrestrial visitors. They may instead represent humanity's way of honoring remarkable individuals, or entire social classes, whose knowledge far surpassed that of the societies around them. To a community that had never witnessed the engineering of massive stone monuments, a master builder might seem like a god. To people who knew nothing of astronomy, someone capable of predicting the rainy season with perfect accuracy could easily appear to be speaking with the heavens themselves. Sometimes, the only difference between knowledge and magic is the understanding of the observer. And perhaps that is the most fascinating truth of all. The long-headed people may never have been gods, but in the eyes of those who came after them, they were no longer merely human. Yet, if science can explain most elongated skulls through the practice of intentional cranial modification, why do millions of people still believe they are evidence of extraterrestrials? What makes that theory so much more compelling than the archaeological evidence? Perhaps the answer is not hidden inside ancient tombs, but within the very way the human brain evolved to confront the unknown. Why is the alien theory so irresistible? Be honest with yourself. If one day you were walking across a desert and suddenly came upon a skull unlike anything you had ever seen before, what would be your very first thought? Would you assume it belonged to an ancient culture? Or would you believe you had just discovered evidence of something beyond the boundaries of human history? For many people, the second answer would come naturally, not because they lack knowledge, but because the human brain has evolved to be captivated by the extraordinary. Cognitive psychologists suggest that people do not simply search for answers. We search for stories that make the world feel more mysterious, more extraordinary, more magical. The more surprising an explanation is, the more likely we are to remember it, the more likely we are to repeat it, and the more likely it is to spread. That is exactly why, when the first photographs of the Paracas skulls were published in the early 20th century, the public imagination exploded. Their unusually tall craniums, their elongated backs of the head, their striking features, so unlike the familiar image of the modern human skull. To many observers, they looked less like members of our own species, and more like beings from another world. Then, as the years passed, more and more theories emerged. Some claimed they were descendants of Atlantis. Others believed they belonged to an extinct human race. And still others insisted they were the first undeniable proof that extraterrestrials had once visited Earth. These stories were so captivating that they quickly escaped the boundaries of archaeology. They appeared in books, in documentaries, on television, across the internet. and today they continue to attract millions of viewers around the world. But science works in a very different way. Archaeologists do not begin by asking, "What is the most exciting explanation?" They begin by asking, "What explanation is supported by the strongest evidence?" Current archaeological evidence shows that intentional cranial modification was never unique to Peru. Similar elongated skulls have been discovered throughout the Caucasus, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, Africa, and even North America. What is especially remarkable is that these cultures had little or no direct contact with one another. Yet, they all arrived at the same fundamental idea: that the human body could be intentionally reshaped to communicate social value. This makes the theory of one mysterious lost race far less convincing. If dozens of different cultures independently produced elongated skulls using the same biological principle, then the simplest explanation remains the strongest one. Human societies in many different parts of the world independently invented the same cultural practice. History has shown us that this is hardly unusual. Agriculture emerged independently more than once. Pottery did as well. Writing also developed separately in multiple civilizations, so why couldn't cranial modification have done the same? And yet, the story does not end there. In recent years, several remarkably unusual mummies have once again captured public attention. Some appear to possess only 3 fingers. Others have unusually small, elongated heads. A number of independent research groups have even claimed that DNA analyses from these specimens do not perfectly match modern humans. Those announcements immediately ignited controversy across the globe. But scientists remind us of one essential principle: extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. A damaged DNA sample does not automatically become extraterrestrial DNA. An unusually shaped skeleton does not automatically represent a new species. According to many forensic specialists, ancient remains have endured thousands of years of decay. They are often contaminated by bacteria, fungi, soil, minerals, and even the DNA of everyone who has handled them over the centuries. If the sampling process is not conducted with absolute rigor, the results can easily become misleading. That explanation may sound far less exciting than a story about alien visitors, but history has one fascinating habit: the truth is rarely as spectacular as the imagination. And then, another question naturally emerges. If the long-headed people were not visitors from the sky, why do so many civilizations across the world tell stories about mysterious teachers who brought knowledge to humanity? Is this merely another mythological pattern repeated across cultures? Or does it reveal something much deeper about the way human beings preserve the memory of their past? To answer that question, we must leave the ancient skulls behind for a moment and step into a mystery even greater than they are. Why does nearly every civilization believe that its own civilization began with a first teacher? Why does every civilization tell the story of a first teacher? Imagine this. You are a child living 4,000 years ago. You have never studied physics. You know nothing about astronomy. You do not understand why the sun rises every morning. You have no idea where the rainy season comes from. Nor can you explain how tiny seeds can transform into vast fields of crops. Then one day, someone appears. He knows exactly when to sow the seeds. He knows how to channel water from the mountains down into the valleys. He knows how to build enormous stone walls that hundreds of other people could never hope to move. He can look up at the sky and accurately predict the exact moment of a solar eclipse. To you, who would this man be? A human being or a god? Anthropologists suggest that the distance between a wise man and a god is sometimes measured by nothing more than the knowledge of the observer. History has demonstrated this again and again. In ancient Egypt, Thoth was revered as the one who bestowed writing, mathematics, and knowledge upon humanity. In Mesopotamia, Oannes was said to have emerged from the sea to teach people how to build cities, practice agriculture, and establish laws. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl brought calendars, art, and civilization. And in the Andes, Viracocha was remembered as the creator god who taught humanity how to live before disappearing beyond the distant ocean. At first glance, these seem like entirely different stories. But strip away the names, strip away the languages, strip away the appearances of the gods themselves, and you begin to notice the same pattern repeating itself. A figure appears, bringing knowledge, transforming an entire society, then disappearing. Researchers believe this may be one of humanity's universal mythological archetypes, not because every civilization encountered the very same mysterious being, but because every civilization eventually had to answer the same question. Where did our civilization come from? When no one could remember the real answer anymore, human beings created stories, not to deceive, but to preserve meaning. This reveals something extraordinary about the human mind. Cognitive scientists have shown that people remember information far more effectively when it is woven into a story. A list of facts is easily forgotten, but a tale about a god emerging from the sea can survive for thousands of years. That is why mythology should never be treated as literal history, but neither should it be dismissed as meaningless fiction. Myths often preserve a memory, not an exact memory of events, but a memory of what those events meant. Perhaps Viracocha never literally walked out of the ocean, yet behind that legend may lie the fading memory of a group of people who introduced revolutionary new technologies. Perhaps they came from a distant land. Perhaps they possessed knowledge far beyond that of the surrounding communities. Or perhaps they were simply the first people to organize society in a more effective way. As centuries passed, humanity forgot who they really were, but it never forgot that they had changed the world. That is also how the long-headed people gradually stepped out of history and into mythology, not because they were necessarily biologically different, but because they represented a class so powerful that later generations could no longer see them as ordinary human beings. But if everything ultimately comes down to culture, memory, and mythology, then what do the long-headed skulls truly tell us? Perhaps they were never telling the story of an extraterrestrial civilization. Instead, they have been telling a story that is far closer to home, a story about ourselves. And with that, we arrive at the final chapter of this journey, the truth hidden within the long-headed people. The long-headed people of ancient Peru may never reveal every part of their story, but perhaps that is precisely what makes history so fascinating. Because every new discovery does more than help us understand the people who lived thousands of years ago. It also helps us better understand ourselves. So now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe the long-headed people were simply an elite class distinguished by a unique cultural tradition? Or do you think those ancient legends still conceal a chapter of history that we have yet to uncover? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely look forward to reading your perspective and discussing this fascinating topic with you. And if you enjoy exploring history, anthropology, and the mysteries of the ancient world through the lens of science, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our future explorations. In our next episode, we'll dive into an even stranger question. Why are humans the only species that deliberately reshape their own bodies in pursuit of status, belief, and beauty? Trust me, that story isn't just about ancient Peru. It's about every one of us.